All right, welcome to this episode of Unpopular Demand. I'm your host, Ethan Ijumba. I'm joined today by Walker Robinson of Your Neighbors, here to talk about his recent project, album, the overall group, the band, the brand that we're all going to get into, and pretty much go into it. But first and foremost, how are you doing today, Walker?
Pretty decent, yeah. A little exhausted from my illness. I was talking to you about a little prior, but yeah, I'm feeling pretty good otherwise, yeah.
Glad you're here and glad you're fighting through it. Nonetheless, we'll be in good health soon, hopefully sooner than later with you.
Yeah, the lights at the end of the tunnel, for sure.
Yes. So just to get into it, what exactly is Your Neighbors for those who don't understand or those who don't know for the listeners?
It's kind of a project that I just started working on, and it's like changed over, the years since it started. It started out as like a jam band at a college that I went to, and then all those guys pretty much aren't making music anymore, and I just kind of stuck with it, and I was writing all the songs, and slowly over time just started working with different producers and other musicians and stuff. So it's like kind of a I don't really know how to describe it, but it's just like revolving like cast and crew with me kind of as like the CEO, for lack of a better term, as weird as that is to say. But
that makes sense. But then for your role of what it is, what exactly do you feel you do musically? Are you the one deciding or arranging the tracks or creating the lyrics, or is it everything in between and all the above? Or what exactly is your specific role of what you do?
well, up until some of the newer stuff we're working on this next thing, whatever it winds up being, not this album that's about to come out, I write and have written all the songs essentially by myself, especially like lyrically and melodies and stuff like that. And I take a traditional producer role in the sense of like I'm not like super put together. Like when it comes to like computer stuff, like I can't really click in all the stuff. Like drums are like the hardest thing for me to make, and so basically I kind of like backseat produce a lot of the stuff that we make, and I'll say like, hey, maybe fix that over there, or like sometimes like a little Ruben like in a way, but
Yep.
yeah, it's kind of just like I have like an idea that's like a lump of clay, and then I hire out a bunch of people that basically can mold it into something, and I just kind of guide them with all their skill sets and talents and stuff. And I play guitar on pretty much all the songs, and then trying to think of like anything else. I'm not too savvy with the keyboard, so that's usually passed on to somebody else where it gets clicked in. Trying to think of any other roles that I kind of work. I mean, I don't know. It's like I've heard there was an interview with Jonah Hill on The Breakfast Club, and they were talking about Frank Ocean, and they were saying that he is like this like taste maker essentially, that like his taste that like kind of influences a lot of stuff. And I think I've heard Travis Scott say something about that too, that it's like he's like the glue essentially that does it. It's kind of a similar role to that as well. But yeah, and then like very writing forward type of stuff, like in my wheelhouse, I guess. I don't even know if yeah, that's essentially it, like to a T. Especially like I'm very like nuanced with the way I try to like look at like every almost millisecond of the song. Like I'm kind of a student of a lot of different types of genres, and a big thing is like call and response, and like the way that the track kind of like reacts to itself. And there's this one guy that I work with named Will, who's pretty much touched everything that I've done up until this point, and our tastes really line up a lot. So his influence as well, I think we kind of play off of each other in a pretty unique way. And like I said, our tastes are pretty similar too, so we don't find ourselves disagreeing that often. And he likes to subvert expectations a lot of the time too, so even he'll take some creative liberties sometimes, and just like he's just perfected the art of left field basically. Like you think something's gonna happen. I just got a bounce actually of one of the songs that's gonna come out after this album, and he put this outro in there. I was just like, how did you even think of that? But it's so sick. And like, yeah, his influence for sure is like he's a student of like EDM and like kind of like the old like knife party stuff, and love acrylic and things like that. And so like it's weird for like a more like band driven type of thing to like see those types of stuff, but it's always been kind of like a what's the word? Like it's always been like kind of an influence.
amalgamation maybe of everything, or
Well, especially from the beginning, like we had this song called X that at the end of it, there's like this weird ass like dubstep break, like just kind of out of nowhere. And I remember like the first time he ever showed me that, I was like, can you double that and make it longer? And he was like, oh, I didn't even think you'd like it. And so it kind of became like the thesis statement, and then it slowly kind of evolved over time. And so, yes, trying to strike the balance between, the band driven stuff that I know people like from us, like, at least our fans, and then kind of the stuff that I like as well. And so, because playing it live, like it's fun to have those EDM things in there, and I think it's fun to have that element to it, and then also too having the musicianship as well is also equally as important. So like finding like the right songs to be able to like accent both of those things is kind of like the line we walk on for a lot of our stuff.
and then further speaking on that, your recent singles being Out of My Mind, Dogma, and No Dice, you just released earlier this month of December. What exactly was the direction of going with those ones? Because like you said, there's a lot of differences of genres that are blended in here, and how you're such a student of different kind of genres as well too. How exactly did you go about making those and crafting them? And what was the sense of just direction that you were going for when you came down to putting them and composing them?
So this whole project, like this album that's about to come out, I had this idea of making like it's essentially just like a concept album in like a more traditional, sense, but like all the songs basically tell like a story in a way. So they all kind of go into one another. I have this one song called Smacked that came out in 2019 that's got like 5 or 6 genres in it, and it just kind of like bounces around everywhere like all at once. And I thought it'd be really cool to do like a long form version of that. And so essentially this is just that, like a 33-minute long form, all over the place type of thing. But I wanted to have a through line with the writing that like made it make sense. Like if you listen to the lyrics, because there's some moments on there you wouldn't really know what was happening unless you followed the lyric lines like all the way through it to make it make sense, because like it is shocking sometimes. So like the first 2 singles, so No Dice and The Dogma, was more of like you can hear them transition into each other, and then Out of My Mind is track 6. So, there's a little gap in between there, but it all kind of like ebbs and flows into each other in a way.
So then when it came down to creating the story, were you crafting it as you were making the music? Was it just on the wave as you were making it? Or did you kind of have the idea and the direction and the overall storytelling elements before everything came about to the music side of it?
I think I always had like the way I knew it was going to start and end. As it developed over time, I think it took a lot of different turns that I wasn't really expecting. And like I think a lot of albums in particular, like to make them like really cohesive and stuff, like you kind of have to follow it where it leads you. So I'd say I had like some type of roadmap more or less. Like I knew how I wanted the story to go, but as far as like the music itself, like I kind of just had to follow wherever it, led. Yeah, I would say like it was decently calculated, but I don't know. It is always, if I could play you like 40 other songs that like didn't even make the project, like exactly, and like you have a lot of like ideas that you think are cool in the moment, but then in the context of the album itself, it just doesn't work. Your lyrics don't really line up with the backdrop of the song, and so yeah, like I think it's just kind of, if you have a story that you want to get out, sometimes it takes a little bit more patience to actually get the right music behind it. And also, these songs aren't really normal a lot of the times too. Like, I mean, they kind of go all over the place.
They're very unorthodox. That you find a good way of bringing it all together, so it doesn't seem that it almost like, for example, for your song Dogma, it starts with such an introduction that you would not expect, but it captures you in and gravitates you just to the sound of what it is, with that like EDM breakbeat switch that there's in there in the beginning.
Oh yeah, that's Out of My Mind. Yeah,
Yes, Out of My Mind. I'm sorry.
Yeah. You didn't know sweat. Yeah.
But then it just transitions into something different, but it's still something that you're willing to listen to and want to give more into and see where it goes. And just, it's because it's in the 5 minutes of what it's in from the span, like you can do so much with it, of course. So it makes no sense.
Well, that's the thing too, is like, I feel like people's patience is sometimes pretty like people have like very quick, attention spans. What's the word? Like
we're in a scroll era, my guy.
Right. Yeah.
We are in a scroll and swipe era. There is no more turning pages and reading left to right. Those days are done. Even listening to an audiobook, that is
right. Yeah. Like
started, not finished.
no, they need that like kind of like quick like instant gratification a lot, and I was kind of worried with that song that like people wouldn't get to like the more insane moments of it if I didn't give them something. Because like there is a version of that song where that intro is not there, and I just decided to add it back in kind of more or less last minute just because I wanted to make sure that like people knew what was going to come later down the line in that song, so it wasn't just something that bored them and like was just too just kind of like trippy and slow for the first minute and change. So yeah, I felt like that was kind of necessary for that. And like it also is like a very shocking song. Like, there's like screamo shit in there and then like some Skrillex drops and stuff and lots of yelling. So like I felt like I wanted to make sure that people knew what they were getting into when they first listened to it.
It's perfect. I think the way you got it is perfect the way it is, especially with it almost has that what was that factor, kind of like some songs that are examples of like Brass Monkey by the Beastie Boys with the horns that starts with. You never hear that anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it definitely makes an impression. Whether it's good or bad is up to the listener. But, I love Brass Monkey. I don't know if like sometimes the drops I think scare some of my fans. Like my top song is Chicken, and it's like a very straight ahead, like indie rock or pop thing. And then, they like, oh, what's this? Their new song. Let's hear it. And then they're like, what the hell is
this? Is signed up for?
Yeah, exactly. I wish you go back to making that stuff.
Yeah.
But, I think it kind of, my mood and the things I want to write about are always changing. So I'm sure I'll circle back to that idea again. And we kind of already have with like some of the stuff that's going to come out after this album. I'm pretty excited for it. But yeah, I just kind of needed to get this idea out first before I could work on those ideas.
Of course. And then to kind of speak on that, I think the artists that can give a different form of just instrumentation and music every album, we've seen it with 21 Pilots, Kanye West, Tyler the Creator. I think that is where the fans will start to generate from versus getting something that we know what this is going to sound like and we know what it's going to be like. And then they get stale and then you're labeled as like not we want the old one back, but it's just like, well, he never really did anything better after this or he never really followed up that. So it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't. I feel like as long as you like it, that's all that matters when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day too, it's like who are you serving? Like when you're putting the stuff out, like in my mind, like I've always been doing it just because like I like making music, and so like regardless of if I lose fans or gain more fans or whatever, like it's not really ever been about that. So like if I'm lucky to even have the success that I've had so far, like I mean, it's kind of wild to think about. Like if I go back to like 20 and like. I was just every dollar that I had that wasn't going to rent or me eating, and at the time probably drinking a lot, is getting thrown into music. And so like, I was, and it's a money pit for so long too, because you're just flinging out singles and like, you're like, all right, well, I've not gotten 1,000 streams on any of these songs and I'm not getting anything at all. And I remember, I've told this story, I think on a couple other, like, can't remember where it was. Spotify used to show this thing where if you had less than 1,000 streams, it would only show like under 1,000 or whatever. And like for the first year and a half of making music, like that's all I'd see on the thing. And I was like, all right, well, I think I'll hopefully get there one day. And I dropped that song X I was talking about earlier. And I remember just being like, man, I feel like the song is like pretty good. And I don't know, like no one's like really listening to it. And so I was like thinking about kind of quitting or whatever. Cause I was like, I think I just suck at this. I need to just go back to school or whatever. Cause I had just dropped out. And then like one day I woke up and it had like 3,000 streams and I was like, I was on the top of the world, which is like, in this scheme of things, like absolutely nothing.
Hey,
but,
small wins is still a win.
Oh, I mean, it kept me motivated to keep going. It's just weird that like when you're starting out, it's like the accolades that like bring you excitement or whatever, they can be so much smaller. And then you compare on those, things and then you're like, that doesn't scratch the same itch anymore. Like I can only imagine how some of these like massive artists feel sometimes, like when they have like a huge moment and then like nothing else lives up to it after that, like how that's like kind of handled. Like, that's probably like, quite a shock. But the slow climb to, even a cult following or something, like in my mind, my goal would be like strangely enough, like a Dave Matthews type of career. I like that idea of like just having like a cult audience that like loves to, see you. Not everybody gets it, but he's doing what he loves. And I think like he's a very polarizing artist because like I love Dave Matthews. Like I feel like his writing is so unique and his guitar playing is just like there's no one else that plays guitar like him. His band is incredibly talented, like everyone in there. But yeah, some people just are like, I'll mention Dave Matthews is one of my favorites. Like, Dave sucks. And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm sure people could say that about, my music too sometimes as well. But it's like, Yeah, exactly. Like, you're gonna not please everybody at the end of the day, but putting out music just to, for me to enjoy it, I think it's like always on the forefront, and like I take it very seriously, but it's also like I have to do it, for me, and then the audience and next. So I remember seeing Rick Rubin talk about that. Like the audience comes last or whatever. Like it's interesting because like I feel like that to some degree, but like it's also really nice to like connect with your audience as well. And I think what he's probably trying to say with that, and I'm probably just messing it up, is that by doing it from you alone and for you alone, is it has a better chance of resonating with a wider audience instead of just like copying trends and trying
Yep.
to make the hit or whatever. And
Or even trying to make the trend.
right, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've gone down plenty of rabbit holes too that I thought were super sick, and those songs never got streamed. And then I put out one that I thought was like, this is kind of whatever. And then that song gets like more streams than all the other ones I thought were cooler. So it's like, it's very strange how that works.
I mean, at the end of the day, the people will make, or not even the people, the general audience will create and make whatever it is will be trending. And it's hard to create something from the artist because you're asking yourself to do the job of hundreds of thousands of others and just banking on just yourself as one person. But once you find that 100,000 and that is your cult following, you could say it's almost like, I remember I talked to Nash about this once, and he talked about how, rest in peace, good old Jimmy, who passed away, Jimmy Buffett.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And he's not somebody that this new generation, I would say, or even like from then to old, once he put out Margaritaville, that song found a community of people to come to his concerts in Hawaiian shirts and all get together and enjoy no matter what it was. And on top of that, he found them in areas that were mainly just so prevalent of those kinds of people. So no matter what, as long as he toured and targeted to that area and that's specific, and he found his 100,000, that just took everything off from there. Like that kept him a career in music because he could consistently go to the Floridas or the Californias or anywhere with the coast or anything with a lakefront. But that was going to be his people. And he found his own audience and his audience found him nonetheless. But it was something that he found a group or a community and he built that up at the same time and enjoyed doing it. So it's almost like you can't really mimic or copy that entirely until it's there. Like Playboi Carti fans, that's something in the similar sense. There are a lot more, of course, but at the end of the day, it's something that will come at the end of the day. Like the audience will be last, but if you can kind of like connect with that audience and create that community, you're sailing for however long you want.
That's a beautiful way of looking at it, actually. I like that anecdote a lot because, like, yeah, just like finding your audience and being able to, like, bring those people, the things that they love and connecting with them regardless of if it doesn't have a widespread appeal or whatever. Because that is like an interesting thing to balance as an artist, too, because, like, it is very tempting to follow trends and, like, there are so many bands out there that like, do a specific sound and then you try to chase that sound and then you just sound like a diet version of that and you kind of like lose your own identity and try to chase those things. And so, yeah, it's kind of cool to think about it that way. I haven't never really. So, yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Oh, of course, anytime. I'm just here to talk about music.
Yeah, it is brilliant.
And then when it comes down to what you've got planned for your album, respectively, what exactly do you want the story to tell? Because you said this is more of a story, but what is the story about? What can listeners and just audiences expect to see from what your music's going to speak about? Because it could be anything. It could be a love story. It could be a tragedy. It could be anything of the above.
Well, the idea with this album, so it's called American Hedonism. It's essentially a depiction of a character that is experiencing the 7 deadly sins in like a more modern context. And basically they are living their life in a way that's very like hedonistic, and there's a turning point on the album like very early on where they just pretty much relinquish all their like old like religious ideas and stuff, and they're like, why would I live for anything that doesn't like serve me at the end of the day? Like I pray to this thing and like it doesn't really work, which I think is like a common thing a lot of people have, like a lot of like religious upbringing steer people away from religion. A lot of the time you see either one way or the other. They're like they're super dogmatic or the opposite,
or trying to find exactly, do I really want to be? There's a lot of questioning with it too,
right? Yeah,
because it is like a communal thing as well. People think, if I go against this, what will the people who are in this think about me? And if I go with this, are they going to think now highly of me because I have to be at their level and their standard as well too?
Right. And like, finding your like community of people as well. It's like, are you going to turn your back on, maybe even family or, like the current people that you're around and like wanting to gain their respect and stuff. And like, how does your identity fit into that? But essentially, they just relinquish all that and they just go headfirst into a traditional hedonistic lifestyle. Like, it's like, I'm going to die one day. So I might as well just do whatever I want to do. And,
Yeah.
at the expense of, it's like we're all ants on a hill. So, who cares at the end of the day? And they find out towards the end of the project that it kind of makes everything even worse. And it's like the gluttony of American living can really take a toll on you if you feed into it too much. And it's like general consumerism and lust is in there and drugs are in there. And I do hit all seven. I wish I had the seven deadly sins in front of me right now. I wish I could rattle them all off.
Okay, the ones you listed are the ones that I probably would have listed. I think pride's in there.
Pride is definitely gluttony, lust. There is. Damn, I can't believe I wrote a whole album about this, and I can't rattle them off.
It's all right. We got Google for this.
Yes, yeah.
We got pride, gluttony, greed, lust, envy, sloth, wrath.
Yes. So essentially, even on the album art, it'll be revealed probably later down the line, but all the seven deadly sins are like making up this person's face in like a spiral essentially, and they're like eating out of they're eating an apple, like, like from like the Garden of Eden or whatever. And then there's a gun actually shooting the thing, and it's a pretty graphic thing, but it's essentially just like the suicide of self by hedonism, essentially. So that's pretty much the idea. And like it doesn't end with like a suicide or anything like that, but there's like a moment at the end of the project where have you ever heard the story of Job or whatever? It's like the oldest book in the Bible.
Bring it down for me now. Once you start to speak about it, I'll be like, I know what you're talking about, but I could not off the top. But carry on, speak on it.
So it's kind of an interesting thing. So basically, God and the devil make a bet about this one guy that's like super, like he's like God's number one, worshiper essentially. And the devil comes to God and he says, the only reason this guy worships you is because you gave him all this stuff. Like if you took it all away from him, he would hate you. And he was like, all right, well, let's see if that works. And so God basically blows his life up. And so like it kills his family, all of his like farm is just burned to the ground, everything. He's like sitting on a pile of rubble after all of it. And essentially like three friends come up and they're trying to figure out like where you went wrong. He was like, did you cheat on your wife? Like, did you do this? Like, all these like random things that they're trying to, quantify or qualify God's decision to blow up all of his stuff. And the last song is called Job 40. It's a passage where God finally comes down and gives an explanation. But if you read the story, it's still kind of like a hard explanation to wrap your head around because it's like, you're so small and insignificant, basically. Like he basically just like suns, humans essentially and puts them in their place. And it's just like, hey, like, you're nothing essentially. Like, check out this crazy monster that I made, and he's very frightening, but also like he serves a purpose for me, and that's something that you will never understand. And so it's like I think it's just like humans having to realize that, like, I think sometimes they have an issue with, like, I think the biggest religion in the world right now is probably self-worship, and I think it hurts a lot of other human beings acting out of like that type of impulse and stuff. And so regardless of, what happens after death, if there even is a God or whatever, is that, living in a way that is so hedonistic affects the people around you. And sometimes it's hard to see that because it seems like if you can't see past yourself, it just kind of,
true.
You don't really realize how the curses that you're putting on people by your behavior and stuff. And, so yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot to pick through. And honestly, I've worked on this album for so long, is that there's so many themes that I even forgot about that I was even going in on the first place. Like there's a lot of layers to pick through. And like, I like music like that, where it's like, if you listen to it one time and you listen to it again and again and again, like you pick up something new each time. And there's a lot of layers in that regard. But yeah, it's funny, like it's kind of lost on me at this point, some of the themes I was even going for. But those are essentially like the main ones that I remember the most. You have to remember, like your earlier question too, it's like I've tried to follow this thing. I had a story and a beginning and end, but like the way that it wound up changing across the creation of the project took quite a while. So because of that, a lot of things changed the ways.
And then speaking on how to further convey this message and all the different instrumentations and genres and styles of music that you incorporate into your art, what exactly, specific genre-wise, do you felt helped deliver and serve this message when it came down to creating these songs? Because you could say that, well, this one's going to be a reggae, but is reggae really going to help you give your best message of glutton or pride?
Sure.
Or if you're speaking of envy, I know rock has been a lot of songs that are songs about envy and such too in that aspect, or could EDM be mixed in there? But what exact genres do you feel that you're trying to incorporate to best deliver this message and just give to those for to listen to?
For me, a lot of the time it's like tempos and stuff, rather than like the genres themselves. Because like something like No Dice, I think shows a lot of gluttony as well, and just like, throwing yourself into just like whatever brings you pleasures in life. But, it needed something that was like up tempo, like kind of in your face. And that song's kind of rock to some degree. But then a song like Dogma that is like more pride driven, there's like this one part on the bridge where the character says like, don't you think you owe me something, God? Like after my life has been so bad or whatever. So, they're taking pride in themselves of, thinking what they deserve or what they don't deserve and all of that. So that seemed like something a little bit more slow and kind of like laid back tempo stuff. But it's funny, I feel like I ran into so many different crossroads with like each song and stuff, like trying to figure out like how it needed to be conveyed, that it just made all these songs just sound completely like unrecognizable by genre. Like I feel like Out of My Mind like has like a little bit of R&B elements, but then you're getting screamed at and all that. And so I think it's really more about like conveying the message of how the thing makes you feel rather than it being like very like genre specific. Like Reggae on Smacked, one of the earlier songs, basically essentially about like getting high and like the whole arc of that. It's like that makes a lot of sense. So it's like, oh, you smoke weed at the beginning, have that kind of bounce.
Yep.
Exactly. And then like, it's like, okay, that initial come up is always like what would freak me out the most. Like it's like being from sober to then just like approaching like, how high am I about to get? And then this like kind of like thing kind of ramps up a little bit, and like that kind of lends itself well to like a more dubstep breakdown. And then you're living in the anguish, and then that's rock for a second. And then like you have this brief moment of something pretty, and then it kind of pops in for a second, and then you get freaked out again, and it goes back to the screamo thing again, and then it goes back to the pop thing, and then it all decompresses at the end to like an acoustic thing. And so like, essentially that's how it kind of followed that path. But it's with this story in general, like I feel like doing it long form made it a little bit even more. There were so many more choices that could have been made. I think either way, like I think we landed on as best as it could have been, at this point. So I think we knocked the concept out of the park pretty well, but it took a lot of effort, and it was. Yeah, these songs aren't normal. Like the only songs that are coming out as singles right now are the most approachable ones. And then, there's still 4 other songs and 2 other interludes that'll come out after that are, really just bizarre listens. But like, it's just like the plot, I guess, sorry, I've been rambling, but this is
You're
the
good.
best way of putting it. It's so like, the lyrics themselves, I think, inform the backdrop of like what the song is supposed to sound like at that moment. So like the last song has like a slow Radiohead type thing that then goes into this like heavy drum beat that then goes into a screamo section, and like that's all based on the plot line, essentially kind of informing what's to happen underneath the lyric. So that's probably a better way of putting it, like how that kind of decide.
And then with all that being said, what do you want the takeaway to be from this album? And what do you want your takeaway to be from just as your project itself when it comes down to it?
I mean, at this point, like I just hope people think it's a fun listen, and at least on the surface. And if it means anything to people, I hope that they find like I don't know. I think that people want to be seen sometimes, when they listen to music is something that people want to hear themselves when they listen to music. And I hope that people
Connections there.
I hope people that have the problems that I had that I was trying to, convey on this project, that like it at least helps them kind of feel seen with all of that, and, makes some kind of impact. I hope, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like it's hard to go in with like any intention, like when the album comes out, because it doesn't belong to me once it's, released.
Yeah.
That's up for the listener to decide, what it means to them. They could be like, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. This is sick. They could be like, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. I don't even know what they're doing. And then there's going to be a subsect of fans that are really going to dive into the lyrics, and then they're going to be like, I really resonate with like what's going on here. I didn't know that somebody else felt that way.
And there's people that's like, oh, it's too slow. It's not for me.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's like there's a whole spectrum of how people will react to it. But I mean, at least my hope is that at the very least, they enjoy listening to it.
Agreed. And I think it's going to be one for everyone to enjoy nonetheless. I know that there's a lot of parts of it that people are going to take away from it that they may like, and there's going to be some things that they don't like. But at the end of the day, I think that with how great your music is, of what it is, and what you deliver and how you just overall compose it and put it together, I think that's going to be the most amazing takeaway. When you speak on it just on an objective standpoint, I think they're going to be like, okay, despite me liking this genre or not, the way he blends these genres seamlessly into one track and making it as cohesive as it is going to be the best part and takeaway for it.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I'm pretty excited just to see people's reaction. Like, I've played it for a few people. Actually, my dad's reaction to his first time listening to it is on the album. I sent him the whole project while he was on a road trip, and he called me while I was in the studio, and I didn't pick up because it was just too loud in there. And he left me a voicemail of his reaction. I thought it was so funny, so I actually wound up putting it in at the end because like it ends pretty harrowingly. And then like, you know, I felt like I was like, okay, maybe we need to like decompress this moment for a second. So like just having my dad come in and, you know, just be like, wow, I don't know what that was, but it was great. You know, like, yeah. And there's, you know, talks about it for a second. And yeah, it's like kind of like a nice, like, okay, that's the end of the experience, I guess. But yeah, it's a wild listen. And
no, it's amazing still the personal touch is given.
Oh yeah, I combed every second of this album and tried to make sure that everything was, you know, the way I wanted it to sound. And I think we did it. We what we were setting out to do got done. And I think that's like usually the moniker of like, you know, is it good or is it not? Is it, did you give it your all? And
Sure.
it certainly did. So
No,
I hope people like it. So,
no, it's amazing to hear, man. Appreciate the time though with speaking on everything about it, honestly. And just for those listening again, the album is going to be called what again?
American Hedonism.
American Hedonism. And other than that, this is Your Neighbors. Thank you again, Walker, for your time. Appreciate having you on the show.
I appreciate you, Ethan. This is great. I really appreciate you having me.
Of course. Thank you.